All right, we're going to call our board workshop to order, 5 o'clock. Declaration of a quorum, 7 members present. Move to item C, public comment. Ms. Horn? No comments. Brings us to item D, consideration, discussion, possible action related to the CSISD board operating procedures. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Horak. Board members, each of you have a paper copy, so you can follow paper or up on the screen, either one. So, of course, we spent quite a bit of time discussing and reviewing this last month, try to go capture some of the suggestions and edits. And so I wanted to walk the group through this, and if we are where we need to be at the conclusion of our conversation, then I'd be asking for action. But let's go through it, make sure we captured everything and everyone is in agreement on the adjustments for our board operating procedures. So first thing, after the title page, as soon as here we go. The suggestion was made to add our vision, core beliefs, and commitments and our strategic plan. So I didn't highlight all of it in blue. That would be a whole lot of blue staring at us all at once. But I did kind of highlight the topic. So we did capture all of those things in there just to be reflective of our current strategic plan. The ethics, and again, we'll come back and change all the formatting, get a little more presentable after we approve the content. The suggestion was made under honor and conduct, make every reasonable effort to protect the integrity and promote the positive image of the district, I believe was wording that we kind of landed on last month. Any questions, concerns, suggested edits on that item? Okay, pressing forward. There were no changes under role of board. Communication, we made a handful of edits just to make them consistent regarding communications to the board president and the superintendent. So those are denoted here. I'll probably make sure the order is consistent just for wording. It was recommended at the last meeting that we add the statement 6 and 3. It's the same statement, and it has to do with receiving complaints from individuals or employees. It's a board member recommended the board member may remind the person sharing the concern that the board member wishes to remain impartial in the event the concern or complaint becomes a grievance subject to board review. I think that's a good edit suggestion. Communications, this was mentioned as well. Superintendent will provide annually a planning calendar with anticipated board reports and recurring action items each July. I went ahead and shared that with you, I think, in a couple of transmittals ago through next June, June of 23, and so I can share that out annually. I keep a 3-year running calendar, so this is just a matter of sharing it with the group so you kind of have an idea of what's coming during different months of the year. We made some cleanup here. So I even mentioned some things to Executive Wednesday and went back and changed it again as we talked to TASB Policy Council and Legal Counsel. I think really they told us we were probably trying to make things too complicated. So I want to take a minute on here. Previously, it mentioned non-agenda comments heard at the time listed on the routine agenda where we have public comments, and then agenda items heard at the time as it appears on the agenda. The suggestion from TASB Policy Council was the wording you see here, comments regarding non-agenda items and agenda items heard at the time listed under hearing of citizens, which would be previous really to any action items whatsoever, including consent. Right now, hearing of public citizens on the actual agenda is after we do consent. And so we probably need to flip the order of those. That way an individual will capture all the hearing of citizens, non-agenda items and agenda items all at one time in the agenda. If they speak to an agenda item and the board wants to speak to it, whether it's consent or not. If it's consent, you can pull it and have dialogue regarding that item. If it's a non-agenda item, of course, there's no dialogue that can occur. So this just makes it a little flow cleaner, more efficient and timely instead of splitting our public comments throughout the course of an agenda. Everybody good with that? Okay. We left these other items. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Use of an interpreter, unused minutes may not be accrued. One time at the mic and so on and so forth. So we cleaned some of this up as well. G, we could not limit the number of persons. So we scratched that out. H, this has to do with the person addressing the board should stand, and previously it said provide their address. We can't really ask them that they disclose their address, but we did put in the wording to indicate whether they do reside in the district or not. Is everybody with me so far on these? Okay. That then, Mr. Horak changes just some of the introductory comments to reflect the changes. So, and again, all of this, guys, if we take action on it, will be effective in March. It has nothing to do with this evening. It's already posted. We'll follow business as usual according to the posted agenda. So we would need to just wordsmith, Mr. Horak, the wording in your opening comments to reflect the changes we just discussed. So during this time, public comments are welcome. So if we move public comments before consent or anything else, Open Meetings Acts prevent us from responding to speakers regarding agendas not on the item or non-agenda items. Comments related to the agenda may be discussed during the deliberations on that item. Is everyone with me? It does clean things up quite a bit. It's amazing when we really start digging through some of our operating procedures, what we find. Okay? Let's see. I believe, guys, after that, I did strike D. I mean, we deliver those to you typically on Friday before the board meeting. I haven't been sending the draft. Typically send the agenda with the links when we send it to you just prior to posting. So that's not really our practice. If you want us to make it our practice, then I'll strike that and we will. Does anyone have? We're good? Okay, I'm pressing forward unless someone stops me. And then the end, we made quite a bit of edits, but these were all things we discussed quite a lot at the last meeting. Annually at a workshop, retreat, or training, board conducts a self-evaluation. Team of 8 reviews board operating procedures. Superintendent conducts new member 3-hour local orientation. So we just kind of cleaned up the wording because that was there, but it was kind of hidden. So this kind of calls it out a little bit. So we'll be more diligent in making these things happen each year. Hey.
Do we define what the team of 8 is anywhere in the procedures?
Probably not, but I can, Mr. Ben, I can come in and be more specific as to what team of 8 is. Okay. And grab that as a required training is, yes, I can clarify we all know what it is, but I can write it in so that.
I was going to say less for us, but more for the public.
Right, for the lay person, sure, absolutely. Molly or Chuck, y'all make notes so we get that, okay. Let's see, officer elections held at the first regular call meeting in November. We discussed selecting board officers in the process, and then action and open session. We also discussed committee assignments and how we would do those in July as opposed to December every year, and letting incumbents hold their prior seats and assigning newly elected members to those that were exiting, just to try to maintain some continuity through the course of the school year. We listed those out, and there we are. I like the changes. Feels it's good stuff. Any questions?
I think I do have one, and that's the one that back under the board meetings about the agenda where you decided to cross that out. I know we haven't been getting a draft agenda, but I did kind of like that idea that was in there. And I'll tell you, the reason being just the way our agendas fall, you know, we get them late on a Friday afternoon, right? And just if there are questions and we need to talk to you, we can't really get to that till Monday. I mean, we're not gonna bother you on the weekend. I don't know, it seems like it could be nice. I don't want to make it an undue burden, but it'd be nice to have it, at least to look at it an extra day ahead of time.
I could actually send it the Wednesday after executive. It will have none of the supporting documentation linked to it, but it's easy to send you a draft agenda early, but none of the link, you're
That's what
not
takes
going
the
to
time.
have the explanatory notes and those types of things. If the group wants the agenda that executive settles on and we work through on Wednesdays, then I can absolutely get you just that copy. That's not a problem. But just know that, and I think why I stopped sending it is because it doesn't have the supporting information in it, so I didn't know if it really shed light really into the details so you could process. But absolutely, it's not difficult if that's the preference of the group. It's already prepared because we have it when we sit down with the executive committee on that Wednesday. So it's really just the preference of the group. I struck that because that's not what's occurring at this time.
Got it, yeah. Well, and again, without all the extra documentation, I'm not sure how useful it would be, but I'd be willing to give it a try if it's not really any extra effort on your side to see if it's a little more heads up ahead of time to start looking at things. I don't know if it matters to anybody else or if you have an opinion.
I mean, I prefer to have it with the backup documentation, but I could say we could still keep it strike, but you could send it. I mean, this is procedures, but you could just, transmittal's not in here either. So
Good point.
you could still send it without it having to be in this document.
Whatever
I'm fine
you-
with that.
That's good. I hadn't sent it. We'll just email it out Wednesday after we come out of executive, if we make any particular edits. And then when we post, we'll send it with the links and the supporting information that you typically receive on Friday. Does that work?
Thanks.
Okay, that's not a problem. It's already ready. With that, if everyone's good, I would ask that for formal approval, and then we will clean up the formatting, make it look more presentable, and get it posted and send you a copy when we make those a final clean copy.
I move to approve the board operating procedures as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion?
That is subject to defining team of 8.
Correct. Edits as mentioned.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Martindale.
Thank you.
We will move to item 2, consideration, discussion, possible action related to setting a date and time for a management oversight workshop in the area of technology. As he makes his way back to his seat, I will talk very slow, say hello to everyone. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Horak. We have our oversight management workshops once a semester. It's time for technology. Some dates, the dates that we shared in transmittal were April 4th, 6th, 25th, 26th, and 29th. So I wanted to get with the group and see if we couldn't settle in on a date and get that in our calendars. We again, a reminder, oversight management, we tend to do around the lunch hour. If that still works from everyone, like 11 to 1, go for an hour, break for lunch, and resume. Any suggestions, recommendations, or dates that absolutely, of those that I listed, that don't work for you? April 4th, 6th, 25th, 26th or 29th?
The 29th doesn't work for me. And then the early dates, they will probably work. I just wanted to put the other trustees, let you know that I'm on kind of a rolling trial docket for 2-week periods on those first couple of dates. So it'd be hit or miss. The 25th, I could definitely be here.
Throw this out. Does the 26th work for everybody?
Yep.
11 to 1?
11 to 1.
No.
No.
Darren, does 11:30, 12 o'clock, or is that day out altogether?
12. I get done at 12. Mondays are out, so that's why I was looking at.
I mean, 26 works for everybody. We could maybe,
I can get there like 12:15ish.
we could maybe
That's up to you
12:30
guys.
to
I'm here already, so.
12:30. Does 12:30 to 2:30 work? 26? Good?
Good. All right. So we will, everybody pencil that in. Ms. Horn, also the 26th of April, and we are going to go 12:30 to 2:30, and we'll still reach out and have some lunch ready for the group when they can grab at 2:30, or excuse me, 12:30.
All right. Sounds good.
Good? All right. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move to item 3, consideration and discussion regarding the work of the Academic Achievement and Class Rank Committee related to board policy, EIC local. Mr. Martindale.
That ad hoc committee continues their work, a very lofty task for sure. Here with an update from their latest, let's see, one meeting in person, and then, well, they
Both were
were
in person,
two,
one
but they're
just-
kind of a different structure. Is our Executive Director of Secondary Education, Mrs. Parkerson.
All right. Good evening. I'm excited to share with you the updates in our work. We are making forward progress, even though this evening you may not see as much of that in the policy language and so forth, but I wanted to fill you in on where we are. So we are, once again, parsing through potential recommendations to bring forward to you. The consensus of the committee that the earliest graduating class that we would be able to implement any changes with would be our current 7th graders, just to give you that context. So once again, no one in high school would be impacted. We are working our way from the middle back to the beginning and then to the end again. And so I just wanted to emphasize again the order of the work that we are progressing through. For this first section here that we tackled, it actually had 2 decision points. And then we are really honing in on the calculation piece and the local graduation honors in our current conversations. So just a quick summary of what we have already reached consensus on. We have consensus on a 3-tiered grading system, weighting system, rather than a 2-tiered. You'll note that academic dual credit has been added as a descriptor here in Tier 2 as a signal that we know that we are able to offer the same academic dual credit opportunities at both of our comprehensive high schools. And so it is important to the committee that if we are going to include dual credit, that we have those same opportunities for students to take those courses at the comprehensive high schools. So we've had a lot of conversation around technical dual credit, and it ebbs and flows a little bit depending on the teachers' certifications and backgrounds on what we're able to give. And so it's not as clear cut as it is on the academic side as well. For decision 2, which is really the conversion chart that goes along with the 3 tiers, we've landed at moving from this 2-tiered system to having the Tier 1 highest level being a 6.0, Tier 2 5.5, Tier 3 5.5, and so forth. Once again, that gets our 90 to equate to a 4.0, and that allows us to extend giving students credit for weighted courses down to 70. When they're given the course credit, they also get the weighted grade points as well. So we are really wrestling with the third decision point here about calculation specifically. The consistent application for graduating class piece is simply the phrasing that says we're going to do this to all the kids in the same group who graduates together in a cohort. So that's not something that there's a lot of discussion around, but really the calculation piece speaks to inclusions and exclusions, and then local graduation honors are really determined based on everything else in the policy. So this is our current policy with the calculation piece. I want to emphasize that it says that we include all high school credit courses, and then it's immediately followed by the exclusions of the things that we do not include. And so we're trying to simplify some of that as we're working our way through this system in our recommended changes. So just to make sure we are all on the same page, the purpose of our grade point averages is really to measure academic achievement by illustrating that level of rigor or difficulty of the courses with the weighted versus unweighted courses. That really gets us to the three-tiered system, and the reason why we have that to designate levels of rigor. It also contextualizes individual student performance by comparing that student to everyone else in that graduating class. And so it's really about that cohort of kids within the same school. It's not even about comparing across all three of our high schools. It's about the set that they have been attending school with. Does that make sense? So keep this in mind as we work our way through kind of the feedback and where we are as the committee. GPAs are used primarily for college admissions. For example, for most Texas public universities, the top 10% are automatically admitted. There are also a lot of scholarships that set parameters related to GPAs. And then certainly it is how we as a school district then determine our academic honors that we recognize at graduation through our honor graduates and so forth. So at this point, this is where we are, what we have come to some consensus about. We believe that students need to have an unweighted holistic GPA included on a transcript because there are some purposes, especially with scholarship applications and things like that, where our counselors are currently spending a lot of time going back in the behind the scenes part of our eSchool system and then having to provide that for students anyway. So we'd like to share that on the transcript so people can see that holistic view of student performance. Then also including a weighted GPA, which would then really be what we're using for that comparison data, that class ranking system across our students. So through the course of the conversation, I believe last month I told you we ended in the middle of a conversation. January 24th, we came back and had a lot of table talk and conversation around things, had opportunity for the committee to provide individual feedback in context, because philosophically, we are very much aligned on the why we need to make changes to our GPA policy. It's the what that we're really parsing through together. So in the committee's opportunities for feedback, there were certain trends. For example, going back to that all that is currently in our system, when you really look across our students' GPAs, there's an inconsistent number of courses included, both in total, the denominator of the average is different. Plus, when you look at the different types of courses that are included, they're widely varied. And so it really is and not an apples to apples comparison that we are ranking students based on. There are also some advantages and disadvantages based on student strengths. For example, in the core areas, just because of the nature of the courses, there are more math and science offerings available. So if that's your strength, you have an opportunity for more weighted classes in those areas. Similarly, in electives, while we have done extensive work to try to make equitable opportunities for students across electives to have similar weights and all of those different enticements to stay in their programs, it's still widely varied. For example, athletics can be entirely excluded. There are honors contracts in certain areas and others. And so that's really what those advantages and disadvantages speak to. And then we also know that we have concerns about students not selecting their courses based on their interests, their desires, even perhaps a long-term career plan, but more so on which courses are weighted and which are not. And we are in the midst of registering current 8th graders for high school courses. And so that I could share many anecdotes, but I won't, related to families and their conversations they're having at home of of, ooh, do I take this because it's weighted, or do I take this because I love it and it's a passion? And so while that's not the direct purview of this committee's work, what our committee does has the domino effect of influencing those types of conversations in the courses that we offer. So additional trends based on those concerns. There's a lot of discussion on limiting the number of semesters of classes including, so for that class rank weighted GPA. So it is a more equitable comparison with the same things in it. There are various comparison school districts who have done this in different ways. And so we have strong opinions on which of those would work best for us, but the core idea is that limitation of what's actually in there. Simplicity and understanding requirements. So we don't want to create a system that continues to say all of this, but then read the next 3 paragraphs to explain what's not, right? That consistency for our electives is incredibly important. And then in philosophical order, the last 2 bullets are at the core. We want to make sure that we are honoring students' unique interests through encouraging them to explore and develop in a variety of areas, which is the outcropping of what we do with our GPA policy. And then certainly we are aware that we have concerns for students and their mental health in chasing that GPA, and how can we as a system positively influence them to have balanced lives and embrace their diverse interests through the framework that we set through this policy. So that's just kind of where we are in our conversations. We will continue those conversations at our next meeting. We also jumped ahead and went ahead and started discussing Decision 4, in part to come up for air and move away from Decision 3 for a minute to then be able to come back with it to it. And so we use our weighted GPA. There is consistent feedback from the committee that we do want to continue to use the weighted GPA for our local graduation honors. This demonstrates where our cut points are for our current honor graduates within our system. So 4.0 and above, our summa cum laude, then we have our magna cum laude and our cum laude graduates. So it goes the whole way down to an 85. And so as a committee, I provided examples of different methodologies that are used out there by other school districts. This is another area that is very unique to each school district. So method 1 is what we currently use, those GPA cut points. A committee member described that as this method has the student compete against themselves, right? Like striving for that next piece to be able to cross the finish line to get there. Method 2 is percentages. This is more that comparison once again, as is looking at just raw numbers. There are a couple of our comparison districts that have a policy that has something as simple as, we will recognize the top 10 graduates, period. Okay, so based on the committee feedback, we'd like to continue that practice of really looking at our GPA cut points. And so we're in the process as we continue our conversations in determining where those would fall. Once we landed the methodology, that helps me to figure out what examples to now bring back to the committee for them to look at, to parse through the numbers and how this would affect like our current graduating class if we were to move it, how many would be in each category. Just so you're aware, about 40% of our graduates in the last 4 years of both comprehensive high schools have been honor graduates based on our academic honor system, which just shows how highly competitive and academically driven our students are. And so we want to make sure that we're still celebrating that success in some way. I will say that the conversation has been SUMA being the top tier, should it continue to be the largest number of honor graduates or not? And so we'll parse through that in our next meeting as well. So as far as our next steps, we're going to take all of the feedback and convene a rough draft based on that feedback with some different conversation points to revisit those table talks on March 7th. For the tables to discuss again, reach consensus as a table, and do the cross-teaming and move forward in that consensus building process based on that feedback. And then we'll continue to provide those monthly meetings, monthly updates to you all as we work through this complex process. And with that being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So I do have some questions, or I'm trying to figure out how to ask it. And this is more based on what you're sending us in transmittal. which thank you for that. It's very in-depth and all the links and everything and for us to follow. It looks like one of the decision points is around, and it's the calculation part, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that you guys haven't done just yet.
What we're conversing but haven't come to consensus about. Yes, ma'am.
Correct. So it's looking like, from what I'm gathering from what I'm seeing in transmittal, is that we're leaning towards, well, one of the choices is to only count core classes. And then the other choice is to count core plus other stuff, right? And I liked the slideshow that you included from Friendswood. I think it was Friendswood ISD.
It was, yes, ma'am.
And a lot of their, like the student voice part, and the teacher comments and all that, I read those and I was like, oh, this looks great if you went with the core, only counting the core. But I'm trying to get to where my question is. But my question is, if that is what the committee decides, how do we know that we're not unintentionally affecting those kiddos that don't do well in our core classes? The ones that need that, need those other courses. And that's really that's where, that's my inner struggle. Because I read all of the comments and how, and I totally get, and I ask the question and I just keep talking. I'll stop in a minute. Because I hate the GPA game. And I do want these kiddos to be taking courses that interest them. So I see the value in only counting the core classes for the GPA, for the weighted GPA, right? Am I understanding everything?
Yes, ma'am.
But I just struggle with that question that I just said about, if we went that route, would we unintentionally hurt kiddos that excel in other areas? Am I making sense?
It does, because it's really complex.
Yes.
And I think it comes back to the purpose of GPA, especially the weighted GPA being for comparison based on academic achievement. And so after this last, the feedback from the committee on February 7th and 8th, some of the mathematics masterminds are going to help us to kind of take a look at not necessarily the top group of kids, but some of those in the middle, like on the cusp, and run some scenarios. I don't want to overpromise because we're not computer geniuses or we would be selling our own product to do all these calculations, but to really look at how this affects kids in our current system. I will say at a glance, if you were to look at our top 10% type kiddos, they have figured out how to work the exclusions that are currently in our system to have their GPAs primarily be a core and load focused GPA
Correct.
already.
Right,
So,
right. And I see that.
yes, ma'am.
And then, explain to me though, the unweighted GPA. Because whenever you said that, I was like, oh, I don't really know what that is. And so what would that look like? And if that's on the transcript, how is that used? Talk to me a little bit more about that.
So it would clearly indicate this is unweighted. There are certain circumstances where, because school districts have such individualized policies, that they need to figure out how to do comparison across school districts. So they ask students to provide an unweighted GPA to have a better idea of, is this an A student or not, and be able to kind of see that holistically. Where I have seen this in examples is really on the scholarship side, in scholarships in particular that want to show, like, if a student has a 4.0, then they're automatically eligible for X amount of funding at this private university or at this out-of-state college. That's where the real-world examples that we've seen have really come in for the unweighted.
And does the unweighted GPA include all of their courses?
It would be everything.
It'd be everything. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I look forward to all the information. And again, I'm just amazed at all the work that this committee is doing. And I know that they're thinking about this a lot more often than just when they're, on the committee. So thanks again for all the work.
All right.
I had a question kind of on that same logic. Is it possible that someone, say they're mediocre or middle of the road at the core, but they really excel at the electives, they could have a higher unweighted GPA than than a weighted GPA. And ostensibly, admissions clerks would notice that.
They could, yes, sir.
Okay.
And so on that note, Round Rock ISD is a district that does both, and there's language in their policy that does note that you could have a higher unweighted GPA than your rank GPA is the verbiage that they use. And after hearing from the college admissions counselor, once a student is beyond the top 10%, they really do start looking more holistically at the student, and that's where the positivity of having a variety of electives that you are taking and completing a CTE program of study and, doing all 4 years of fine arts and so forth, really come in that holistic view of students.
And I think, Jalen, to your point, I think it's kind of a philosophical thing we have to decide. Are we educating or providing experience? And ostensibly, if someone's performing well in the core, they're probably being educated and therefore prepared for secondary or for higher education. Whereas if they're not excelling in the core, maybe they're looking more at CTE or fine arts. I think that's the philosophy of, are we educating or are we trying to provide experiences? And I think we're trying to do both. But if they're trying to go to college, how do we best serve our students? It's a trick. I appreciate the work. And the transmittal is great because it's a tough nut to crack.
Thank you.
And Ms. Parker, I believe you said you talked to college counselors with this process, right?
Yes.
So what to look-
So we had a college admissions counselor come from A&M and speak to the committee as a
Right.
whole. And in fact, he even came back and did a follow-up with our counselors. So we heard from him twice from Texas A&M, and he gave really good feedback. They normalized GPA entirely after the top 10%.
And that's kind of what I'm getting is I think what they're going to forecast what they do now, and this is happening across the country, is they take the courses they want and forecast how they think the student will do. So it's almost irrelevant once we're past top 10%. In terms of what we do, the universities are just like, for those who are deciding to go to college, the universities are forecasting based on the courses they want to look at. So they might take some of the electives if they're related, but they're also looking at the core. So, it's tough. I don't know that that's right either. I just know that they're going to look at the courses they want and then forecast if you are going to be a good student or not.
It's also of note that they shared with us that they look at the weights of core classes, but any of our other weighted courses outside of the core are entered in as unweighted, regardless of whether we personally in our school district weight them.
Yeah.
And it's a great discussion in here, wonderful discussions that we've had in this committee. So, but the point you made that people in that committee are all really trying to get to the same goal, just trying to figure out the best way to get there. We do want to celebrate each student's unique success and allow them to, choose courses that they are interested in and they can do well at. And is the best way to do that to include those classes in their GPA or the weighted GPA, or maybe not? Because then if we don't include them, it may open up a whole lot of just freedom for people to do what they really are interested in. I mean, that's been a lot of the crux of a lot of the discussion around this question. So, and it's not an easy answer, but we're getting there, I think.
I have one last question about the process, because it's easy to do like the middle 80% or the top 10% is probably a tight shot group. And so those students that are on the bubble, that maybe the 11th percentile or the bottom 20th percentile, are there test cases that y'all use to apply to test how that would affect those students?
So we have, at the beginning, we have 5 sample students that represent the gamut of the high achiever to kind of the person who's there for the experiences that you mentioned. And so looking at the simple forecast that we have done is that using the people's systems, the school district systems that limit courses, it doesn't change the rank of those 5 kids. And so that's a very broad spectrum view, right? And so as we move forward, that's one of the things that we'll be working on, is doing what you're asking, more of that sampling of, if we did this, how does it affect these kids here in the kind of in that midpoint range? And by midpoint, I mean the bubble, the 10%,
Right.
the 15%.
Because I think obviously for modeling, the broad strokes, but as you get closer to a solution, you want to test those outliers, make sure they're not getting swept out.
Absolutely. And we will have limits as to what we're able to model and how many kids we can run through it. I want to be transparent about that. So, yes, sir. Okay.
Anything else? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiffany.
That brings us to item 4, receiver report on science instruction and CSISD. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Horak and board members. Ms. Gibson was unable to make it last month. This is one of our regular program reports we were scheduled to receive in January, so she's joining us today, Ms. Amanda Gibson, our coordinator of science instruction. So she's going to give us a little program overview and educate us on all the workings occurring in CSISD related to science instruction. Amanda, it's all yours.
Thank you. Mr. Horak, Mr. Martindale, members of the board, I'm pleased to be here tonight to give you a brief report about science in CSISD. We'll work our way through several areas, including a description of the program, major goals, some performance data, program challenges, and needs for the program. CSISD Science includes 16 general science courses, 7 elective courses, and 8 CTE Science Partnership courses. As with the other curriculum content areas, our program elements include curriculum development, instructional materials implementation, and professional development. Science has the added elements of safety practices and certifications, management of campus lab supplies and equipment inventories, and science fair. At central office, the science staff includes myself and an administrative assistant shared among the content coordinators. We have full-time classroom teachers who serve as department heads and curriculum writers. The district science department supports more than 270 science educators, kinder through high school. Local funds allocated for science are held at both the campus level and the district level. On this slide, I've highlighted the items that comprise the largest portion of my district level budget. We provide non-perishable consumables for science labs for K-8 campuses, a 5-year rotation of campuses for equipment replacement, and a 3-year rotation for science department heads to attend the CAS conference, which is our state science conference. On the federal budget side, we use Title II funding to support the professional development and implementation of inquiry practices and argument-driven inquiry into the 5th through 12th grade classes, with expansion to include K through 4th grade coming soon. I'll talk more about ADI and inquiry on later slides. The goal for all CSISD science courses, kinder through 12th grade, is for our students to experience opportunities to become informed critical users of science, craft and communicate evidence-based observations, analysis and conclusions, design and conduct investigations in order to generate reliable knowledge, and analyze interactions within natural, designed, and interconnected systems. These statements were written through collaboration of our K-12 science curriculum writers, and they are the focus of our curriculum and the learning experiences that we choose for students. We believe that if CSISD students can independently use their learning to demonstrate these statements, they will be able to transfer their course knowledge to experiences in the world around them and approach problem solving with a scientifically literate mindset throughout their life. When I started in this role in the fall of 2016, I began by talking to teachers. During those conversations, it became clear that CSISD science teachers are innovative, passionate, and active advocates both for their content area and their students. Over time, a few concerns they had also bubbled to the surface. Difficulty in obtaining supplies, which was causing teachers to spend their own money on lab materials, inconsistency in the amount of time spent on science instruction, lack of assessment tools to measure system-wide student performance, and misaligned instructional materials. We also discovered some areas of vulnerability around our safety practices. My first 5 years as the K-12 science coordinator have been dedicated to removing barriers to the vertical alignment and cohesiveness of science instruction across the district. We have written a CSISD science safety policy manual that outlines safety procedures specific to our lab classrooms and established policies around frequency of teacher training as well as equipment inspections. As mentioned on the budget slide, we have worked with our K-8 teachers to establish a catalog of a wide variety of lab consumable items. Teachers fill out a form to let me know what items and quantities they need, and then we pack up the items and send them through campus mail. Our curriculum writing teams have completed vertically aligned curriculum in all but 2 of our K-12 science courses. And all of our 5th through 12th grade science teachers completed training in inquiry, as well as argument-driven inquiry, and are currently working on implementing those strategies into daily classroom instruction. The next 3 years will be busy ones for us as well. K-12 science is approaching our next adoption year in the fall of 2024. To that end, the years between now and the 24-25 school year have been planned so that we are as ready as possible to land on both feet. The first row provides information about the state's timeline between the approval of our new TEKS, which occurred this past fall, adoption of new instructional materials, and the year we begin teaching our new TEKS with all new resources. The second row shows how we will begin writing our new curriculum in 3 large chunks over the next 3 summers so that CSISD science curriculum is revised and ready for all K-12 courses in the fall of 2024. The third row gives the timeline of professional development, which includes understanding our new TEKS as well as revised instructional practices to meet the demands of our new standards. The last row is an implementation schedule so that our system has time to make measured adjustments between now and 24-25. As mentioned in passing on previous slides, one of the major activities for secondary this past couple school years has been training in science instructional practices. These training courses are helping us more closely align to the science practices required by our TEKS and the goals outlined in the CSISD strategic plan. Traditional labs most closely resemble what we probably experienced in our own science classes growing up. Procedures, data tables, and follow-up questions were provided by our teachers, and students simply followed the leader. All of our TEKS from kinder through 12th grade are written at the guided inquiry level, where students are taking a guiding question provided by their teacher and designing an investigation that will answer that question. ADI labs take it one step further and include group presentations with peer feedback, as well as a written lab report. Guided inquiry is our goal for daily instruction, and we're working towards having 4 to 6 ADI labs for every course, 5th through 12th grade. Traditional labs are definitely more efficient in terms of time, but they are the least student-focused and least likely to support differentiation or long-term retention in the concepts and content being taught. System-wide, we are slowly transforming our lessons to do fewer traditional labs and more guided inquiry labs. As mentioned earlier, our elementary campuses will participate in the same training over the next 2 years. To help illustrate argument-driven inquiry, I wanted to share a few pictures from our own classrooms. This slide shows 2 ADI argumentation whiteboards from different groups in the same class. One group chose to change the mass of the car rolling down the ramp. The other group chose to change the mass of what the rolling car was hitting. Both groups understood the effect that mass had on distance rolled after a collision and shared their investigations with their classmates through an argumentation session. Anyone want to guess what grade level this is from? Third? Anybody else? 5th? Yep. These student samples came from a 5th grade classroom. So, yeah, if you got it right. It's amazing how well the students share their ideas in this written format. Notice that each group chose to represent their data differently, and their analysis and justification also varied. However, they were both solving the same guided question using the same materials. These pictures were taken a couple weeks ago at Consol during an AP biology class. During this part of the ADI lab cycle, each group has members that stay with the whiteboard and members who travel to other groups' whiteboards. While visiting, their job is to ask questions and give feedback on how to make the argument stronger. In the picture on the bottom right, you can see the student who is presenting has made notes of feedback received so she can share it with her group members when they all come back together. You may wonder what our teachers think about ADI labs this year. I asked a few of our secondary teachers to share with me what impact they've seen this year by doing ADI labs. Beth Hudson is a 6th grade teacher at Oakwood, and she said, "I love using ADI with my students because they're figuring out how to work things on their own. They are talking and collaborating on science topics. The conversations between the students are amazing. Watching them become true scientists makes me proud to be a science teacher." From Wendy Miles at Welborn, we hear, "I love that the ADI model allows scholars to problem solve in different ways. It allows them to see that they do not have to use the same procedure as others to get an answer to the same problem. ADI fosters success in all scholars, no matter their ability level. In addition, they are able to show their brilliances during the argumentation stage and see how others thought through the same problem. Even though this format of investigation requires a lot of writing, scholars still really enjoyed it and were surprised at how easy it was to communicate their findings." Lastly, Stephanie Owens at Consol teaches advanced biology, and she states, "Through ADI labs, I have learned more about my students than I ever have before. I get to see, hear, and experience their individual prior knowledge social skills, and any misconceptions they may have that I do not normally see when teaching or doing cookbook labs. We, students and teachers, learn more about the content, nature of science, and how to successfully work together even when we do not agree. As I've been out on campuses during the fall and winter, it's been amazing to see student engagement during ADI and other inquiry labs. Hearing their conversations with each other and the depth of the questions they're asking their teachers has been so exciting to see. Also noted at the bottom of the last 3 sites have been the icons from our strategic design plan to indicate that the quotes shared by our educators are evidence of our core beliefs and commitments, our learner outcomes, our portrait of a learner, and our portrait of an educator. Both our past work and our future work is focused on one overarching goal, providing CSI students with the best possible science education to prepare them to be scientifically literate adults in our community. To that end, I look at a wide variety of data points, not only assessment data, so that our district, campus, and classroom efforts can be focused to meet our goal. Currently, I'm monitoring the impact of teacher training on student outcomes in secondary science classrooms. When I visit classrooms, I also look for evidence that students are using authentic science practices while they're learning content. Our department head team also monitors performance on specific TEKS over time through MAP and STAR data. When looking at data, areas where we are consistent across courses and buildings can be addressed with system-wide curriculum adjustments or resource alignment, whereas areas that apply only to a portion of the system require more targeted and specific strategies. In both MAP and STAR EOC assessments, we see our secondary students outperform national norms, which were established pre-COVID, and state averages in all science instructional areas. For 3rd and 4th grade, our overall all district averages are above national norms as well, but that trend is not consistent when looking at campus level data. The trend also does not hold above national and state norms for all the student groups represented in our student body. One action item for me based on this data is to make sure that I include strategies for differentiation in the training courses I offer, as well as give our professional educators opportunities to network across our buildings and share their expertise with each other. Another action item is to make sure that our ADI labs are placed in the most critical units so that our most engaging and rigorous instructional experiences are targeted to the areas where we need the most growth. MAP reports such as this one allow me to compare growth between testing cycles and monitor the effectiveness of the changes we've been making in teaching practices. The blue bar is how much our students in each grade level grew, and the rhombus shows how much growth should have occurred. All 3 graphs show fall to winter growth data. The 1920 graph shows pre-COVID data. In 2021, we see the COVID and virtual learning impact. This year's fall to winter growth shows us regaining much of the ground we have lost.
Amanda, can you go back to that slide, please?
Yeah. Backing up. Yes, sir.
Okay, so tell me what the points are again. The blue bar is
The blue bar
student growth.
is how much our students in each grade level grew in that testing cycle. So each of these is fall to winter growth. So we have 1920 fall to winter, we have 2021 fall to winter, and 21, 22, sorry, that's a lot of 20s, fall to winter. And the rhombus indicates, according to
They're
national
projected.
norms, what is expected for them to grow.
The projected growth.
The projected growth, yes.
So 1920, prior to COVID, we're right at where we were projected. Our
Yes,
students
every grade
grew.
level hit right on the money.
Right.
Yeah,
And 2021, obviously, because of the disruption in the system,
Yes.
virtual, those types of things,
correct.
the growth was not what was projected. And so this fall shows we're kind of getting back on track, probably with the exception of 4th grade, but everybody else is right where
Correct.
they would have been
where we
projected.
would want them to be.
So a fairly quick recovery. That's a good
Yes.
thing, I believe.
Yes. I'm excited to see even as we look at winter to spring data as well, because that's part of what we're monitoring to see what impact does the professional development on science practices and just how we're delivering instruction to the kids, what impact that's having on their growth. MAP only specifically assesses content, what we call our processes, like how the students interact with the content or what they're doing in terms of designing their own investigations. It doesn't necessarily specifically call that out. That's all embedded, but we do get specific data about that on the STAR test in 5th, 8th, and on the EOC. So we'll be kind of keeping our eyeballs on that to see what impacts we see from year over year on that.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that the third and fourth grade at some campuses, and the
Correct.
graphs show that they're lagging. Is that geographic, or is that because of the developmental age? Because it looks like the fourth graders from 2021 have caught up because they're fifth graders now. So is it developmental age, or are you focused on specific campuses?
Want to make sure I understand your question correctly. This is district level data, not campus level data.
Okay.
So for third and fourth, we're showing lagging in the norms. But when I look at make sure I'm going. When I look at the, like, on each test, there's life science questions, there's earth science questions, and there's physical science questions. And so we trend very similar with each other at the district level, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. But when you look at those same levels within campus views, there is a lot of variability from campus to campus. So some may be higher in some and lower in another. And so that tells me as the content coordinator that I need to target those kind of, like, have those targeted conversations with
Is it
teachers
anything
on
to do
those
with the age
campuses.
of the students at that developmental stage?
I think that third and fourth graders are wrestling with learning to read and write and do mathematics.
Okay.
And sometimes in science, because science is a very vocabulary heavy, any question that is asked in science is going to automatically be a little bit higher reading level just because of the academic vocabulary that's there. So we do see some correlation with that in terms of readiness for those content. Also in fifth grade, though, they are on a bell schedule, and so they get very consistent every single day, application of that, and their teachers they only teach that one content. And in elementary, our teachers are juggling lots of plates. They're teaching math and science at third and fourth grade. Some of them are also teaching social studies, and that's a lot. That's how that's designed, and that's as it should be at elementary for those teachers to be teaching multiple subjects. I'm not saying it should be any different, but it impacts everything. So, yeah.
Then I was just going to confirm, I mean, we've said before all the norms were set pre-COVID.
Correct.
Is that still the case?
That
They've
is still
never
the
been
case.
adjusted?
Yes, the 2020 norms were, and Molly can feel free to double check on me on this. I think it was based on 17, 18, and 19 that they built the 2020 norms. And so that was all way pre-COVID before they set those norms for national for us.
Thanks. Good news.
Okay. As we look ahead to the next few years, particularly in view of the 24-25 school year, there are a few challenges that will provide opportunities for us to grow. We face both district and campus level concerns, particularly in the areas of equity of opportunity and variability of performance data. Currently, we only have MAP and/or district assessments from 2nd to 8th grade, and we lack those tools for our high school courses that would help us measure implementation of the curriculum, mastery of the TEKS, and equity across our campuses. We want to be prepared for 24-25, and we want to provide teachers the support and time they need to make those adjustments. Implementing system-wide TEKS changes, resource adoption, curriculum, instructional practice shifts is challenging with our current staffing.
What do you mean by equity opportunity? Do we not offer science training to certain campuses?
We offer science courses or science training. Make sure I heard
Well, you
you.
said equity of opportunity is one of the challenges. Could you elaborate on what equity of opportunity means?
Yes. So some of that for us is we're looking at high school in particular, like we don't have any tools that say we have our curriculum, but we don't have any tools that measure the implementation of that curriculum. And so does a B in one class mean the same as a B somewhere else? You know what I'm saying? So we don't have any measurement, any way to measure that, to say that is equitable. We also have areas of variation in instructional time for not at secondary, but at elementary. There's variation in how much instructional time students receive in science. So, okay. Oh, sorry, I need to go back one. All right. To meet these challenges, I've scheduled dedicated training and cross-district planning time in past and current school years, and I will continue to provide that as much as our schedule and resources will allow. 5th through 12th grade has a head start on their training, but K-4 will begin training next school year. The CSISD science program will also need new curriculum to be written over the next few years so that we're ready for our adoption. And Performance Matters may provide some banks of assessment items for our high school courses, but we will need to either purchase additional item banks or develop our own, particularly for courses like environmental systems or forensics or things like that that are not likely to be in those banks. Providing content-specific instructional coaches to support implementation of new TEKS and instructional practices would also pave a smoother transition for our educators, if that were possible. It is an honor to work with and learn alongside our science teachers and our campus administrators. I truly appreciate that our teachers are willing to engage with me in thoughtful and student-focused conversations. They ask me hard questions, and they are willing to be challenged with hard questions as well. Through this partnership between central office and our campuses, we have made great strides in the last 5 years, and I look forward to what the future holds. Thank you for your kind attention. If you'll have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Take any other questions.
I'd like to say thanks, because especially what I took from that slide is the catch up back from COVID, and Mr. Martindale and your team, just that catching up across the thing. I think it's great, science especially.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to be clear that you said the teachers spending their own resources to get materials, that's been dealt with, right?
Correct, yes. What we provide in the consumables closet, it's a lot of random stuff, like pom-poms and rubber bands and baking soda and file folders and all those things that, they just, it was sometimes easier to just go to the grocery store and get those things than it was to go through the red tape process that it takes to make those purchases. So we've pre-purchased those things. That catalog was developed with them. So they sat down with me and they said, these are the things that we use for labs. And then we ordered those things, and it's been great for the last several years. We've had really strong usage in our consumables closet.
Great, and I like the integration at the elementary schools, getting the A&M to come in, show them what science really is. I like that a 6-year-old asked me about testing a hypothesis, but
Yeah.
we need to work on the human sampling ethics. Her data collection gets a bit sketchy.
I also want to say thank you. I think it's a great example of why we have this curriculum role that you've had for the last 5 years, right? Working on that vertical alignment of the science and also the consistency across the campuses. So thank you. I also love that, I guess I hadn't maybe thought about as much how you can also use the map data, right? And the details of the map data to help make that happen. So that's fabulous to see. I do have one question, and again, I promise it's not loaded. It's just a question that I get on occasion, and I was curious if you have had discussions or thought about the question that comes up sometimes about moving biology down into middle school. So, yeah, is that something that's discussed, or
Yes.
pros and cons? So.
Yeah, no,
Again, I am
I'm
not.
sorry, I'm looking at
saying
Mr.
yet-
Martindale's body
I
language.
promise I'm not. My kids didn't do it. I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if it.
Remember,
so-
give her the answer we talked about.
Okay, I'm panicking now. We have, before we got our new TEKS, we did look at the TEKS that we currently have on the books, and we were looking at whether or not we could offer a compacted option, because in kindergarten through 6th grade, I mentioned earlier, those 3 kind of main areas that we get, that our instruction kind of hovers around: life science, earth science, and physical science. And the kids get little pieces of that in kinder and first and second and third. They don't get specialized deep dives in courses and topics until they get to high school. So we looked at the 6th through 8th grade standards, the ones that are currently on the books, and we figured out that we could actually compact that into 2 years. And then that would offer an opportunity to bring a high school course down. We've discussed it. We've, we've talked to counselors, we've talked to principals, and it needed to be tabled because there were a lot of other things going on just with advanced courses, and we needed to iron out some other things before we got to that point. I think that our science teachers are ready to have that conversation again, but we certainly would need to do that with the new standards and look at it really clearly. Our new standards are, they moved some things around, which is normal, that they would move some things around, but they also took those science practices and they moved them down into the content standards as well. So it's a little bit of a buzzy statement to call it like cognitive rigor, right? But they really are they are more difficult standards. They've upped the ante in terms of what students would be doing and the accountability of not just what they're learning, but how they're learning it, which is good. I think it's a good thing because before all the process standards were separate from the content standards, and it was easy to kind of skip over them and go right to the what we're teaching and not the how it's being taught. So yes, there's discussion about which we would bring down, whether it's biology or whether it's IPC or whether it's some, so we're talking about all of that in our department head meetings. We actually talked about it last week. So it's getting bandied about. And yeah, we have a very busy next 3 years with just what we have on our plate. So we'll see kind of what.
Great.
How
I figured
that
y'all had
evolves.
at least had the discussion. And
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure there's more pros and cons than I
There's
understand.
lots, yeah, on either side.
But we do have lots of science class opportunities in high school, and
Yes, that's
almost
true.
so many that you can't fit
it
them
can be a
all in.
little overwhelming, yeah.
Right. So it's great. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
So, when in your report, seeing that the consistency across campuses and so forth is a great thing, is there, for what I'll refer to as, you also referred to underperforming campuses. Do they have any, or could they have any additional resources or programs or something inconsistent to help those particular campuses?
Sure.
Okay. Is that something that you're working on, or?
I think that a lot of that is going to be addressed in when we do the training. And that conversation came up really, we had very rich conversations 5th through 12th grade about some of that just through the inquiry training, the ADI training. And as we've started kind of infusing some of that into practice, a lot of that differentiation and just the natural differentiation, but also listening to kids and having it be more student driven and less, teacher talk, has kind of created a vehicle for that to happen. And so I'm expecting those same great and rich conversations to occur when I do the training with elementary over the next few years. And I think that a lot of that will be addressed just with Tier 1, getting our Tier 1 instructional practices more foundational and more consistent across the board. And then from there, once we address Tier 1, then we'll be able to really kind of dig in and look at some of that. So.
Anything else? Ms. Gibson, we do appreciate your time. And very informative.
You'll have
Thank you
lots
very
of
much.
questions.
You did great. And with that, we are adjourned. We'll see y'all back here at 6:30.